The Nintendo Switch is home to plenty of great releases, and developers of all sizes have delivered excellent games spanning numerous genres. But not every game is created equal, and there have been many disappointments along the way. To that end, we are taking a look back at the history of Nintendo Switch and counting down 15 of the worst games on the platform. Mortal Kombat 1. To say that Mortal Kombat 1 is a bad game might come as a surprise to many, but it's important to understand that it is the Nintendo Switch version that we're talking about here. Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch is a very by-the-numbers port that waters down the graphics to the point that it almost feels unrecognizable to its contemporaries, and even those compromises don't yield performance results. Add to that excruciatingly long load times and bugs, and Mortal Kombat 1 becomes a game that you should try to avoid on this platform. Batman Arkham Knight. Batman Arkham Knight isn't the best game in the series, but there's plenty of great stuff to appreciate in this particular outing. But those merits don't translate over to the Switch port, which is brimming with bugs and technical inefficiencies, marring down whatever potential the game had by a significant margin. Between a constantly chugging frame rate and a tendency to crash every now and then, Batman Arkham Knight on the Switch is a very disappointing release that is almost unplayable. Ark Survival Evolved. Ark Survival Evolved managed to create a space for itself through some impressive gameplay mechanics, but the Nintendo Switch version of the game doesn't reflect those merits. Not that they aren't there, but they are just buried deep under a layer of technical problems that make it really difficult to just enjoy the game. Chasing down gargantuan creatures and crafting gear isn't all that fun when the visuals are blurry and frames are constantly dropping left, right, and center. Vroom in the Night Sky. Vroom in the Night Sky describes itself as a magic bike riding game, and it's safe to say that there's nothing magical about this poorly designed experience. You take on the role of a girl who rides a scooter in the sky collecting stardust, but the poorly designed controls and unresponsive mechanics suck whatever little enjoyment that the game might have featured in the first place. It's an appalling release that shouldn't have been available for purchase in the first place, so you should try to avoid it by all means. Ark of Alchemist. Ark of Alchemist was a pretty middling RPG with many flaws, but some fans were able to find some enjoyment out of this game. The game was released on the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and the port was riddled with bugs and performance issues. Hollow. Hollow is a survival horror game that takes place in a sci-fi setting, and it's not a really impressive game to start with. Unresponsive controls, design issues, and muddy visuals were problems that already existed with the base release, but the Nintendo Switch version makes things even worse, with severe bugs and glitches that force players to reset in order to continue using the console. Hello Neighbor. Tiny Build's Hello Neighbor was a rather interesting game with a unique premise, but many of those ideas were never fully realized in the face of poor design choices or technical frustrations, making it a disappointing experience. The Switch release adds further frustrations into the mix with performance concerns, making it best to avoid this one at all costs. Balan Wonderland. Balan Wonderland was such a bad game that it became a laughingstock when it was released a couple of years ago, and for good reason. It was rife with issues that were not only limited to bugs, but also stemming from design, which made playing through this release a pretty frustrating experience. But once you dig deep into its development history, you will know that this was a promising product that was unfortunately crushed under the weight of publisher demands and strict deadlines. Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. Saber Interactive tried to capture the magic of the original Shaq Fu with the release of Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn, but it's safe to say that the team couldn't meet expectations. Despite working off the same framework of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn's sloppy combat mechanics and inconsistent writing don't really do justice to what came before. Add to that muddy visuals and uninteresting art direction, and it becomes a pretty mediocre game by all accounts. Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection. Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection packages a bunch of related media games into one cartridge and doesn't really put much effort into modernizing these classics for a new audience. There's no additional content to speak of and no refinements or significant changes. It's essentially a packaging of game ROMs, which feels like a big missed opportunity. There's not much value to be found here, and it's best left skipped unless you are a really big fan of the Jurassic Park IP. Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy Definitive Edition. Grand Theft Auto: The Trilogy Definitive Edition packs 3 legendary open worlds that defined a generation of gaming into one handy package, but the souped up versions are utterly disappointing releases that shouldn't have been released in the state they were. Poor upscale textures, irritating visual inconsistencies like intrusive rain or missing fog in the case of San Andreas, and plenty of bugs that are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the trilogy's issues. FIFA 21 Legacy Edition. Now, there's a common belief that annual releases of sports titles are essentially cheap repackages of the same old game, but with a new roster of players. And while that statement might be a bit hyperbolic for some franchises, it's quite literally a true description of FIFA 21 Legacy Edition on Switch.
It's all about translating threats into goals. Let's see what they can do here.
It's virtually the same game as FIFA 20 Legacy Edition, which in turn was virtually the same game as, you guessed it, FIFA 19, which also isn't a flawless experience by any measure, making this release an utterly dated disappointment. Sonic Forces. Sonic has a really bad reputation with inconsistent releases, with entries like Sonic Mania turning out pleasant surprises, while others turning out to be nothing but disappointments. Naturally, Sonic Forces belongs to the latter of the two categories due to a multitude of reasons, including but not limited to an underwhelming campaign, inconsistent difficulties, and a general lack of polish within the mechanics. Biomutant. Biomutant felt like a pretty promising game with its first showings, but the final release made it clear that the game fell short of expectations. Everything from the open world to its combat mechanics and story left quite a bit to be desired, and those qualms start to get more frustrating with the Nintendo Switch version. It's the same game packaged for a lower power budget console, but the visual setbacks and frame rate inconsistency suck most, if not all, of the fun from the experience. Blair Witch. Team Bloober's Blair Witch can be termed as a mostly middling horror experience that has its fair share of highs and lows. It's not a remarkable experience by any stretch, although you could appreciate certain elements of its story or the simplistic gameplay. The Switch version in particular stands out with its blurry resolution and lower frame rates that fails to stick to its target, so it's best to avoid playing it on Nintendo's hybrid console. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.